Thank you, Sophie, and I'd like to welcome all of you tonight. My name is Ted Pierce, and I am a member of the York Library Planning Committee, and we're doing this program in conjunction with the Camden Conference. And we want to welcome all of you tonight and thank you for tuning in. So this is the 34th annual Camden Conference, and that takes place in Camden, Maine, February 20th through the 21st. Those of you who would like some more information on this topic of the title of the Camden Conference this year is The Geopolitics of the Arctic, a Region in Peril. So if you'd like more information on a broader scope, they have a list of books, quite an extensive list, 2 pages worth, and also a list of YouTube films that they recommend. And these are all on their site. Sophie is going to post the site on the chat box. Is that correct, Sophie?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So if you're interested, you can get that. If you miss it, just put in Camden Conference, Maine in your search box and you'll pull it up. Okay, so I think at this point, I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight, Peter Ralston, who is a photographer and is the owner of the Ralston Gallery in Rockport, Maine. And Peter also has a gallery site with these and other pictures, particularly other pictures of Maine, just not the Arctic. So that will also be posted in the chat box. And if you miss that, just put in Peter's name or the Ralston Gallery in Rockport. So tonight's title of our presentation is Photographs and Stories from the West Coast of Greenland and the Northern Passage, the landscape, the wildlife, and the people, the Inuit people. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker and get us rolling, Peter Ralston.
Thank you, Ted.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you all. First of all, thank you all, if you were signed up last week, for being understanding about my thinking to postpone it given the extraordinary events of last Wednesday. Wednesdays seem to be big news days. I'm glad you're here tonight. Enough said, but thank you. Pleasure to be here. This is a subject about which I care a great deal. So I'll bail right into it. Quick overview, but an upfront plug at first. 2 resources that I want to share with you that I think are really very telling. I mean, they're a wealth of information about the Arctic. My God, there's no end to it. But 2 really exceptional pieces. There's a film that's available on Netflix called Chasing Ice. A 2012 film, National Geographic photographer, absolutely award-winning film. It's a must-see if you're interested in this subject, documenting the rapidity of climate change, the accelerating rapidity of climate change visually through the loss of ice. It's absolutely fascinating. The money shot, if you will, the big penultimate moment in it. We visited one of those places, and I'll discuss Chasing Ice briefly in a little bit. The other is a piece, and again, Chasing Ice is available on Netflix. The October 24th, 2016 New Yorker, you can find this article online by Elizabeth Kolbert, Kolbert, A Song of Ice, What Happens When a Country Starts to Melt. It's an extraordinary piece in October of 16. That's the year I was up there, a couple months after we returned from the far north. I'll be quoting some of it tonight from it, but do read it. It's you can find it online. It's remarkable. We have an hour or so to cover a lot of territory. Don't be shy about asking questions through chat, through Sophie, and away we go. So this is not, categorically not, a lecture or formal presentation about climate change. These are just observations about a 5-week trip that I was extraordinarily privileged to take in 2016. I'm not an expert on any of this, but I've long been really deeply interested in this part of the world. I remain passionate about what I've seen. I mean, really fired up. And I want to continue to learn about it. I want to continue to share and hopefully revisit it. You simply cannot go where I went on this trip and not get it about climate change. So let's go. We were not exactly hard pressed for accommodations. We did this trip, and my good friend who has a summer home on Vinyl Haven has this boat, Rose Hardy, ship really, 189-foot aluminum hauled Italian built yacht, formerly owned by Rupert Murdoch. My friend Joey bought it 2 years before the trip. For this cruise, there was a crew of 13, 2 local Canadian guides who knew that part of the world like I know out here along the coast, which I know well, and a legendary ice master and pilot, the world expert on ice. The original plan was a 2-month exploratory cruise from Greenland to Nome. But a situation in the owner's family occurred tragically, unexpectedly. Back in the States, they sent the plane up for him. He left. We thought that was it. He insisted we all stay aboard, told the captain, keep going. I don't know, everything was up in the air for him. So plans, as we know, do change. So I'll give you a quick overview. We flew out of, this was a private flight out of Rockland on July 25th, 2016. We flew here to the very southern tip. I hope you can all see my cursor. Good. Yep. To the very southern tip of Greenland, where the pilots refilled the jet so they could get home that night. We then flew 500 miles north to Kangerlussuaq, and my pronunciation is terrible, so please forgive me. Blanket pardon, please, on pronunciation. The Arctic Circle is here. So when we picked up the boat, which was waiting for us, we were above the Arctic Circle. We came down a 120-mile fjord, came up the west coast, stopped at a couple little villages, went to Ilulissat. You'll hear a great deal more about that. That's where my friend, the owner, left us. We then 2.5 days across Baffin Bay to, here's Baffin Island, big, amazing island, and started visiting Inuit hamlets, Pond Inlet. I'm just going to do the really quick overview here. This is a spoiler alert. We explored around here a bit, then up to Devon Island. This is all Devon Island. It is the world's largest completely uninhabited island. And when we were up here, we were almost 500 miles above the Arctic Circle. So we're getting up there. We bumped along the south coast, headed west, stopped at Beachy Island. We refueled in Resolute, another Inuit village, and fuel was stashed there waiting for us. We were still uncertain about what was going to happen. Would the owner rejoin us after things that were going on back stateside? And it was there that it was pretty much decided he would probably not be rejoining us. So instead of going to Alaska, what we decided to do, and we took our time bumping along and exploring Devon Island. We were really, all of this is really the best of the heart of the Northwest Passage. So it was our privilege, extraordinary privilege, to leave Resolute and circumnavigate Somerset Island here, which we did sort of like this. You'll see this in more detail. We went through an inlet here, more about that. Back around up the west side of Somerset, back to Arctic Bay, the northernmost Inuit village on Baffin Island. And it was from there that I ultimately flew home. So that's the story. Off we go. So here we are in the plane coming in pretty low and slow over the southern tip of Greenland. And our first sight of the fabled Greenland ice cap was, the ice just looks sick. We were probably at, I don't know, 7,500 feet at this point, 10,000 less. I mean, as we got closer and closer, you could just see, as New Englanders, as people who know what ice and snow look like, what healthy ice and snow look like, it all looked like sick ice. And it is. More about that to come. So we landed in, again, pardon me, Korsariasuk, the very southern tip. While the plane was fueling, we went across the fjord and we're poking around in Eric the Red's late 10th. This is where Eric the Red landed and established a settlement in the late 10th century. And guess what? Greenland is green. It was in the low 70s that day. A week and a half before we arrived, where we went later this day to pick up the boat, it set an all-time record ever, recorded record ever for Greenland. It was 75.5 degrees. So we came off the plane, they had told us, you're going to be landing in Greenland, have lots of layers, it's going to be cold. We got off the plane, my God, it was like a June day. And, we were peeling layers as fast as we could get them off. It was quite amazing. Lots of green. This little village subsists on sort of small scale fishing, maintenance of an old United States Air Force base, and some farming, mostly sheep. Here's a recreation of one of the early Norse chapels. But this is where Eric the Red's settlement was. The New Yorker piece, I'm going to quote briefly from the New Yorker piece. There's a quote within a quote here. You'll figure it out. As Greenland warms, the record of the Norse settlements, along with any clues that it might yield, is being erased. Back in the old days, these sites were frozen most of the year. When I was visiting South Greenland in the 1980s, I was able to jump down in trenches guys had left open from the 50s and 60s. And sticking out the sides, you could see hair, feathers, wool, and incredibly well-preserved animal bones. A graduate student who started working in Greenland in 2005 found at the same sites mostly decomposing mush. So I'm going to try to remember to point out these indicators of climate change as we go along here. This is one big indicator here. I mean, look how green it is. And the quote I just shared speaks to the permafrost melting, and melting fast. I mean, it's basically gone altogether here. So after that first little taste of what was, and we were so excited that first day, we thought, oh, look, you can see where glaciers scoured, the hills up there. Look, icebergs, our first icebergs. 48 hours later, we wouldn't even look at these. But anyway, here we are. We joined the boat, running south down this 120-mile fjord. It was like cruising along the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's very hard to get a sense of scale in many of these photographs. I'll give you a few clues, but these are big, big hills. I mean, it makes Somme Sound look like a suburban cul-de-sac, with all due respect to Somme Sound. So we've skipped a couple of villages here, and we've arrived in Ilulissat. Really an extraordinary place. Ilulissat means iceberg in Greenlandic. It's the third largest city, population now approximately 4,600, and that encompasses some of the outlying little villages. This is where the ice gods dwell. And this is where it all started becoming transformative for me. Again, there's fishing here, but it's ever more about tourism. You know, all of these boats, these are not little fun cruise around Casco Bay or whatever boats. I mean, this is sort of business. This is transportation. There are no roads between settlements. So if you want to go see somebody, go anywhere, you want to go hunting, whatever, this is how you get around. If you and fishing and hunting, this is it. If you look in the background here, there are a couple of larger fishing boats. They are, anyway, I'll press on. We'll come back to that. It's a terrific harbor. I really love the place. People were so, I just fell in love with the people right off the bat. Here, a couple guys fishing. We had a good time that afternoon. This guy's baiting a tub trawl. He was going for cod, I believe. Speaking of which, cod, which you can't find any cod here off the coast of Maine anymore. They're basically commercially extinct off the coast of Maine. We have fished them out along with a great many other bottom fish. The fisheries there are doing very well, thank you. This is sort of a mid-size fishing boat. There are probably, you know, maybe a dozen, 20 of these in a Ilulissat. They're rigging up to go set. Here is a big time indicator of climate change. This is really, truly a heartbreaker. The Inuit really value their dogs. These dogs are not pets. They're big, seriously powerful animals. They're really the sort of a furry equivalent, if you will, of outboards, four-wheelers, and snowmobiles. You know, they are working animals. They're at the heart of how the Inuit have hunted for, you know, years, centuries. So here we go. Here's the indicator, and it's a tough one. As recently as 1995, Ilulissat had more than 8,000 dogs. Now only about 2,000. A total index of global warming. Goes like this: no ice, no seals, no hunt, no hunt, no need for dogs, and they can't afford to feed them. They used to feed them nothing but what they got from cleaning out the seals, the whales, you know, the fish. That's what fed the dogs. A bag of dog food up there is a couple $100. Nobody even buys commercial food there. So I'm quoting from the New Yorker, Elizabeth's piece: dogs no longer seemed worth the seal meat it took to feed them. Many were euthanized. Those which remain are used mostly for sport. The mayor allowed, the last time we had ice we could use was 1997. End quote. The Inuit are shooting their dogs. Unthinkable. I will point out, to drive home, you're going to be hearing a lot of this tonight, the significance, the connection between ice and seals, the people, the dogs, the bears, you know, the whole network. An 18th century missionary to Greenland discovered that the native people had no word for bread. So he translated the line from the Lord's Prayer as, "Give us this day our daily seal." Anyway, the big draw, the reason that Ilulissat is a World Heritage Site is the ice, the big icebergs, and the accessibility of them. And the story here goes like this, and this is all an indicator of climate change. So the little harbor I showed you a bit ago is here, okay? You see the cursor over by the word Ilulissat. That's what you just saw, where all the boats were and so forth. The red line is where the glacier itself was in the year 6000 BC. And so here's this great long fjord. The fjord is choked with ice. In the year 6000 BC, somewhere around there, that was as far as that glacier pushed, and it dropped an enormous, basically, gravel bar, a moraine, a glacial moraine, dropping enormous rocks, just almost incomprehensibly big. So there's a gravel bar, a huge gravel bar across the mouth of the fjord. And what that means is as the active glacier is calving, the big icebergs cannot get out. So the whole thing backs up with ice. Here's what's most telling. I don't know if you can read the numbers, but I'll give you the years. The years and the lines I'm indicating are where the face of the glacier was recorded. The calving face of the glacier was recorded in these years. 1850, it was here. 1875, so it melted that much in 25 years. 1880, 1902, 1929, 1942, 53, 64. Okay, tighten up your seatbelts. 2001, spring of 2003, summer of 2003, summer of 2004, 2006, 2012, it's now up here. So just in the past 15 years, the Jacobshaven Glacier has retreated more than it did in the previous century. Since the 1990s, the Jacobshaven Glacier has nearly tripled its flow rate. Now it's the fastest moving glacier in the Northern Hemisphere. It advances at something like 6 feet an hour. That's the annual average, 6 feet an hour. This thing is moving forward even as it's melting back. Even as it's in full retreat, it's still coming forward at an annual average of 6 feet an hour. Unbelievable. Just in the past 4 years, more than 1 trillion tons of ice have been lost. This is 400 million Olympic swimming pools worth of water, or enough to fill a single pool the size of New York State to a depth of 23 feet. The very largest icebergs here, ta-da, which weigh upward of 100 million tons, can hang around for years before floating free, trapped as in a traffic jam by that submerged moraine, the gravel bar, which I mentioned. So here we are in a helicopter that we chartered, flying over the mouth. We're right over the gravel bar. I mean, the gravel bar is right under these big guys. These are the ones that are 100-ton glaciers. 100 million ton icebergs. To give you some sense of size, I mean, it's incomprehensible how big these things are. You saw that lead image of Rose Hardy, 189-foot boat with 200-foot mast. Had we been near suicidal and decided to park, come alongside one of these bergs, which you do not do, she would have been about this big. If you can see my cursor just barely move here, she would have been like that. And her mast would not have even cleared, this low point, 200-foot mast, the low point of this glacier, iceberg. And
Peter?
you got to yeah.
Can I ask a question? Someone just asked me in the chat real quick. There was a question about the slowdown between like 1964 and 2001 on that image you showed earlier with the drawback of the face.
Yeah.
Do you know what slowed it down sort of during that period from 64
No,
to 2001?
I do not. I can't account for that.
Okay.
I mean, there are cycles, there are cold winters, warm winters. I really don't know.
Okay.
It's a great question.
Thank you.
So again, as I say, just to give you some sense of size, Rose Hardy would have just been like an ant next to this thing. And you got to keep in mind that 75% of these is underwater. That's how big these birds are. Quite extraordinary. And it's this glacier that spun out the icebergs that sank the Titanic. That is absolute matter of fact. They know it perfectly well. And just for the Titanic fans among us, it was not, we've probably all seen the movie, it was not this towering thing that reared over the the bridge where the whole, crew was out and the whole bit, ice raining down on the boat. No, it was low in the water, old, the old 50,000, 100,000, 120,000 year old ice, which is clear as glass and hard as a diamond. That's what opened up that boat like a knife through butter. But it came from here. And these spin off these are the icebergs that make it down to Newfoundland and occasionally, out into the Atlantic. This is the mother iceberg maker. So here we are in a helicopter. We flew up north, 40 some kilometers to visit another glacier that was actually calving icebergs into water. So when that one was peeling off and calving, you got the big splashes, which you will see why we weren't getting them back where we were. More of that. So we visited that. Here we are flying back now toward Ilulissat, and this is what it looks like. 600 miles east of here is the other side of Greenland. There's 600 to 700 miles of just rotting ice. It all looks like this. You see 600 miles of this, rotting, water running off just as fast as it can. So here we landed at this viewpoint facing the calving face of the glacier. Now, when you all see, I'm not going to say if, I know you'll all go to Netflix and see Chasing Ice. The extraordinary sequence. This is spoiler alert, but believe me, it's not going to spoil a thing when you see it. Strap your jaws up. Here, these sort of high-tech igloos are scientific, stations where people can position themselves, film, record, and so forth. Observe the face of the glacier, which now is 2 miles further back than it is in this photograph. The two young guys that were there that day, you'll see this all in this film, are talking to James Bailog, the National Geographic guy who was coordinating this whole project around the world documenting ice. And they're saying, not much is going on. It's cold, it's windy, just another day. And then the one guy says, oh my God. And then he said something I'm not going to repeat tonight. Holy blank, it's starting. And with high definition video cameras, over the course of, 90 minutes? They recorded high def with sound, the largest calving event ever filmed. They recorded ice the size of Manhattan Island peeling off into, this is actually all, this is all icebergs here, but it's water. They recorded it all. The thing is, although the geographic size of what they filmed calving off was the size of Manhattan, it was 3 times taller, to give you some idea of scale. It's like looking up a waterfall. It's just huge. I mean, this is miles and miles away. It's just enormous. Anyway, we're very privileged to visit that site. You'll understand when you see Chasing Ice. So here we are doing our best to look very touristy. We had a lot of fun flying this thing around, I can tell you. Here we are playing and on the glacier. We were drinking glacial melt water with our hands. A few of us had bottles that we got some of it. This is now all gone. This glacier is gone. This part of it has melted back. So I'm going to quote now from Elizabeth Colbert's New Yorker piece. It's absolutely beautiful how she describes the big bergs that she witnessed. And we were seeing the same exact icebergs as her. So I'm quoting, "Towers of ice leaned against arches of ice, which pressed into palaces of ice. Some of the icebergs had smaller icebergs perched on top of them, like minarets. There were ice pyramids and what looked to me like an ice cathedral. The city of ice stretched on for miles. It was all a dazzling white, except for pools of meltwater, that fantastic shade a popsicle blue. Nothing moved. And apart from the droning of the mosquitoes, the only sound was the patter of water running off the bergs. So here are two waterfalls pouring off the side of a moderately good-sized iceberg. Amazing. So even though this particular ice drainage area is smaller than the one in Greenland's northeast, there's enough ice in it alone. What this one glacial, think of it as a river valley, this one drainage area, there's enough ice in it alone to raise global sea levels by 2 feet. This is pretty cool. This is about 10 o'clock at night. The sun never sets, of course. It is the land of the midnight sun in the summer. So we were out there. This was the day I first smelled a whale's breath. That was really cool. That was really something. 3 humpbacks just lolling around at the surface, not actively feeding. You get some sense of scale just from the size of these large gulls back here. This is not a particularly huge iceberg. I mean, I wouldn't want to run into it, but it's and remember, 75% of this is underwater still. This is one that's hung up on the moraine. This is why people are coming from around the world. It's sort of like eco-tragedy tourism, to see the ice while you still can, to see this extraordinary ice fjord. And here's an iceberg that has rolled. At one point, this part of it was underwater. You see how smooth and rounded everything is? That's because it's been underwater. At one point, it rolled. This was at exactly about a minute before midnight. Very special night. That's Disco Island way behind there. And again, another humpback. So here we are. We're leaving Greenland now, headed west across Baffin Bay. We go by Disco Island. Disco has its own ice cap. You can see how far back this glacier is melted. This one is melted way back up. Beautiful. It's wild. It's so beautiful there. It's so beautiful. It's so wild. But speaking of not wild and beautiful in a very different way, here's a little, just a taste of, this opulent, gorgeous boat we were in, Rose Hardy. This is the main bridge, sort of downstairs, if you will. We spent most of our time running her from, the crew did, running her from up top. It was not a hardship post. So here's one of the salons inside. And here's the aft enclosed cockpit. 500 bottles of really good wine aboard. We had 2 chefs, one of whom was a 3-star Michelin chef. We were outnumbered by the crew. It was a crazy crew to guest ratio. And the crew were just the most wonderful, lovely people. We all got pretty close. And this was the hot tub in the foreground here. My wife thought it was a bit much. We were going to be up there larking around, in a hot tub, for God's sake. And she was, I think, perversely gratified when she learned that the hot tub had been turned into down cellar, basically, to keep produce. And we kept everything cold we would find ice all the time and just keep icing it down. This is a big deal. I'm sorry I can't make the image bigger. This is not a proper ice chart per se, but it is an overview of sea ice, where the sea ice is. And sorry, I'm just looking at something here. Here is where the sea ice, these are not icebergs, this is just sea ice. Here's where the sea ice was on July 25th, the day we arrived in Greenland. Here's where the sea ice was 3 weeks later. That's how fast it was going. 3 weeks in what was the hottest year on record, only matched by god-awful 2020, which has tied 2016 as the hottest year on record there in the Arctic. So here we're crossing Baffin Bay, 2.5 days, steady steaming. Those of us that spend time in the water find this particularly like, oh my God, are you kidding me? But you know, we were close enough to the magnetic North Pole that indeed compasses, regular compasses, were useless. We had lots and lots and lots of electronic gear, of course, everything triple redundant, so no big deal. So this is our very first sight of northern Baffin Island. We're approaching Pond Inlet, and the very first thing we see in this majestic, gorgeous, gigantic polar desert are 2 hanging glaciers. Hanging glaciers are those which once made it to the sea, into the sea, but have melted back. They have melted back from the sea and become of the sea. And you can see the moraines, you see the gravel bar here, and there's more of it here, and sort of a good sized one over here. That's what moraines look like. So the very first thing we see, Baffin Island, 2 hanging glaciers in fast retreat. Here we are in Pond Inlet, the first of the 3 Inuit villages. In the background is Bellat, B-Y-L-O-T Island, the highest polar bear density in the world. We didn't get over to Bellat. We visited the inlet. Our guides had some friends there, this and that. When we went ashore, everybody sort of went to this little sort of modest reception area. I went for a walk with my cameras. That's what I do. And this is the first thing I saw. There's Bellat Island way over there back in the background behind Rose Hardy. One of only 2 pet dogs we saw the entire time. Nobody keeps pets. It's a real extravagance. Nobody buys commercial dog food there. It's just prohibitively expensive. So you only have a pet if you can guarantee some sort of, you know, fish or hunting bycatch. Caribou. Wood is a rare commodity. We're 1,000 miles above the tree line here, something like that. So wood is not is a precious commodity. So these are Inuit graves. This is a very sobering sight, very sobering place. We'll speak more about this later. Arctic poppies, these gorgeous little delicate things. You have a sense of the what the village looked like. That's about 1/3 or so of the village, maybe 25% of the village back there. It's very much like American Indian reservations. Life here is hard. It's tough. Kids with spray paint cans there have spray painted a few things, you know, life on the res, R-E-Z. These guys are at the end of the earth. I'll speak more about this later. So here we leave Pond Inlet. We were there for 36 hours, 24 hours. And we went up exploring Milne Inlet was the name of it. Makes a fissure in the northern Baffin Island there. This is at midnight. This is a double midnight sun. And I felt at home because, you know, being from Maine, I felt right at home because, my God, there's fog. I felt comfortable seeing that. So I spoke about, well, before I get to scale, the village had it was whaling season, and I think they had a permit for 14 or 15 narwhals that they could harvest. And we knew they were out there. We wanted to be sensitive. So we were trying to avoid where they were whale hunting with the big boat as we went up Milne Inlet. We could hear rifle fire. That's how they hunt them. After they've shot one, they then harpoon it so it doesn't sink and attach barrels to it. Milne Inlet is really an extraordinary place. The geography, it's really hard to tell how big this is. There's no scale unless you look down here. Can you see here at the bottom, this little tiny thing leaving a little wake? That's a 24-foot, I'd guess, aluminum boat, 3 Inuit guys in it, out whale hunting. It was an active whale hunt, but that gives you some idea of how big this is. And out of the frame of the camera, it probably goes up another, 35, 40% more. It's just enormous country. These are the famous Milne Spires. They're 2,000 feet, 2,200 feet, right straight up out of the water. And there's, the height of land is well behind them. It just keeps going up and up and up. You can see some of it back there. And we had 800 or 900 feet of water under us. Really quite extraordinary. So here we're leaving Milne Inlet. I just thought this was a beautiful old glacially carved out scene with an iceberg. We're heading further north, and at the very tip of Baffin Island here on the way out of Pond Inlet is sort of a famous place. Canada had an artist commissioned to paint this. I think it was in the late 60s, mid 60s, I forget. It's notable because it's the only place in the world where 7 glaciers came down to the sea. The only place. That was in the late 60s. Now, or when we were there in 2016, only 1 glacier still made it to the water, and now they're all they're all hanging glaciers. Not one of them still touches. They are all becoming the sea. So we have steamed across Lancaster Sound. We're now 450 here. We're about 450 miles north of the Arctic Circle in Dundas Harbor, D-U-N-D-A-S, world's largest uninhabited island. Amazing place. You really are, this is getting up there. The next little series all took place on one day. It was one of the most extraordinary days of my life. After breakfast aboard, this funky little iceberg rolled, which was pretty dramatic. Didn't get that, but in a minute or two, we'll come back. I'll refer to this cairn left here, this marker, old Inuit marker put there. So after breakfast, we jumped in one of the Zodiacs, one of the inflatable boats, and went tooling around up into Dundas Harbor. It's not a harbor in the sense that there's anything commercial there. There's nothing there. A glacier way up at the head of it. To give you again some sense of scale, this scree, these tens, hundreds of thousands of years of rocks chipped loose from these big rock spires that tower probably another 30, 40% above what's here on the screen. It just soars up. The rock is broken loose by the freezing and the thawing, the freezing, the thawing, and so forth. To give you some idea of scale, how big this is. See this little black speck down here? That's an adult muskox. So we dropped off a few of the passengers who weren't quite as spry and friends, and with all due respect to them, and a few of us wanted to come back and see if we could find that muskox and go after it, looking for it, tracking it. So we found track everywhere. This is Arctic cotton, a unique plant that the Inuit use to stuff their babies' diapers if they're out in the wild, out hunting and whatnot it is intensely flammable. So, OSHA would not approve this as diaper stuffing in the States. Anyway, Arctic cotton, I digress. So here I am, climate change indicator, big one coming up. I'm doing my Peter thing. I'm on my hands and knees and I'm photographing. There were a lot of these absolutely gorgeous flowers. Don't ask me what exactly they are. I have it written somewhere. Here is some muskox spore. So I'm photographing, the beautiful little flowers. They're so delicate, and yet they survive in the harshest. Aside from volcanic slopes, this is as harsh an environment as it gets. And here they are, and all of a sudden, on my hands and knees, being already photographing a bumblebee. Are you kidding me? A bumblebee, almost 500 miles above the Arctic Circle. So I made the photograph. The climate change indicator big time here is I came back and I read, I think it was the New York Times, a piece about a pan-Arctic study being conducted by a scientist at the University of California, tracking the expansion of the range of Bombus polaris, which is the scientific name for the Arctic bumblebee, tracking how they are trending ever further north. This is a classic example of a species increasing its range, expanding its range due to climate changes. So I sent her this photograph because they've been looking for these things as far north as they got. I was able to give her information off the ship's log, lat long, temperature, time of day. I had that on the metadata in the camera. And she was very grateful for this. It was actually an important and clearly documented sighting. She wrote back thanking me for it. She pointed out, she had quite a sense of humor. She was quite a character, that this was a male. She said, we can tell because as in so many other species, the male is the scruffier of the species. So with all due respect to those of us here tonight with beards and so forth. So that's a male Bombus polaris, a climate change indicator. Now this is all the same day. Now I'm back up, another group of us, this is just little groups of us, went ashore to see the old Royal Canadian Mounted Police station there. So I'm standing up where that cairn is that I showed you a bit ago. So this is the old, abandoned long ago. I won't dwell on this. There was a terrible tragedy here, known and in ill renown across the Arctic. The two Mounties here, Arctic madness got them. In the late winter in December of 1927 and January of 1928, one of the Mounties, they lost it to Arctic madness. There is some talk of an Inuit woman being involved with this. The one constable murdered the other, and then days later, after the new year, shot himself. The post was abandoned. They never repopulated it. So it was very sobering knowing this, being inside where these guys lived. Bears had broken down the doors. It was all rather well preserved because it is so cold. There's not much rot. The cold preserves much, even though that's changing. It was poignant seeing that sewing machine. And while I'm in there, I hear, and I have to clean this up a little bit, it's a bear. It's a polar bear. And I went outside and sure enough, there is proved to be a very large, seriously big polar bear swimming onto the beach where we were all standing. And you notice the guy in the orange jacket is the classic slack jaw. And we were all quite taken with this. It did swim fairly far down the beach. One of our two guides, the son, it was a father-son team, is looking, we're all looking at this very carefully. The bears are starving. We saw 13 bears when we were there. Of the 13 we saw, only one had eaten recently, and it was very evident. You'll see that bear. The rest were visibly gaunt, nowhere near filled out. They didn't look healthy. They're gorgeous. They're huge. They're magnificent. You notice the gun he's carrying. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we take bears. That was rule one up there, were the bears, because they are starving. There are no seals. We start looking better and better. They are much more aggressive, and really take that seriously. So he was a little nervous about this one. It was big, and it was obviously had not eaten for a while. So he made us all go back to the boat, to Rose Hardy, wherein I started my begging, groveling, whining, promising, everything. If they would get me back in the Zodiac with a couple of the more adventuresome crew, and let's go look for the bear. I just want to take some pictures. And so this is one of the images I got. And I actually was able to talk those guys who were out of sight of the big boat. And I talked the crew into letting us, I said, well, let's just go ashore. It's lying down. We saw that it was lying down at the base of this hillside. And we won't get that close. But, we'll have the gun with us. God forbid we have to use it. And, but we'll kind of just go have a little look from a great distance. So we clambered out of the Zodiac, climbed up away from the water, and we were on this sort of little plateau. And all of a sudden we realized in this flat plateau, we were in the middle of, I don't know, half a dozen or so old tent rings. We were in an archaeological site. This was an old, pretty major hunting site. These old tent rings. So we crept a little further close, a little closer. There was probably like a 3 or 4 acre, very shallow pond now between us and the bear. The bear's about 100 yards off. And Matt the young guy made it very clear, Peter, that's it. You're not going 1 inch further. This is crazy. And the bear just lay there watching us. It was very much aware of us. This bear is really pretty skinny. I looked down in the water at my feet, and there was a strange thing. The bear is like right up here, okay? But here's this thing. It was obviously a bone. I'm not going to dwell on this too much. I picked it up. It was very clearly an ancient, a really old jawbone of something, but I had no idea what kind of jawbone is this. I had no idea. And the only pictures we got, unfortunately, were with Matt's little, phone camera. Had no idea what this was. He would not let me bring it back with me. God, did I ever want to? But he did point out that we were in the middle of an archaeological site because of the tent rings, and he was very right in making me put it back. If I ever go back, I'm going to get it. But we had no idea what it was. We went back to the boat. Nobody had any clue what kind of jawbone this was. So believe it or not, way up there, if the boat was in the right direction, literally, we had connectivity. So I emailed my friend, Donnie Perkins, who was the founder of Gulf of Maine Research Institute. Said, Donnie, you're not going to believe this, but I swear to God, I'm on Devon, 500 miles above the Arctic Circle. We just found this bone. Can any of you identify what this is? And it took him a little while, and he got back. If we were all live here in person, I'd ask if anybody knew what this was. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, it is the jawbone, the lower jaw bone of a leatherback turtle, the largest sea turtle, the world's largest turtle, which is a warm water creature. So the next question obviously was, how did this get here? It was very heavy. It had quite some heft to it. It did not feel like it had petrified. It was not, fossilized. It was really heavy though, and very, very dense. So we were scratching our heads, how did this thing, how could it possibly have gotten this far north? They need warm water. At which point our 81 or 82-year-old ice captain, Patrick Toomey, comes up, and we're exclaiming about this. He did not know what it was, but he knew instantly how it had gotten there. and he looked at us as though we were all very stupid and dense. He said, well, of course, the whalers. And indeed, 18th or 19th century whalers would catch these turtles at sea in warm waters and stash them down below deck. And as long as they kept them wet, the turtles would live a long time as a supply of fresh meat. So we had stumbled across, given the tent rings and given the find of this, the site of a picnic is not the right word, but a meal shared, meat supplied by the whalers. The Inuit had never had such a thing, of course, in the 18th or 19th century. Really quite remarkable. Anyway, that was all one day in Dundas Harbor, Devon Island. So cranking up the pace here. Oh my God, we're at 8 o'clock. Is that right?
That's right.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to have to really crank it up here. I am so sorry. We got off to a little late start, so I'm going to zip along here. Here we are going, we're bumping along the south coast of Devon. One of the only two seals we saw the entire time on ice, and it wasn't sea ice. It was glacial, little bergy bits. It's a ring seal. This is a bearded seal. We inadvertently spooked two bears that were in the water hunting. They were going after those seals, and unfortunately we broke off their hunt, the Zodiac. This is a younger one, big animal, but obviously had not eaten for quite a while. And I'm going to have to pass on some of my anecdotes. A much larger, fully adult, really big bear, and really thin as a rail. Walrus, still Devon Island. We're making our way steadily west. This is the only bear of the 13 that we saw that had clearly eaten. I mean, its tummy was really saggy. If you eat a whole seal, it's going to show. And it certainly showed in this one. So to rehash, we left Greenland, across here, Pond Inlet, Milne Inlet, Dundas Harbor. This is where we saw the two bears I just showed you. We're making our way to Beachy Island shortly here, and then to Resolute, where we have a fuel stash waiting for us. Beachy Island is famed. It's a holy place, really, for both white and Inuit in the far north. It is where John Franklin's expedition of 1845 spent their first winter. They were iced in, as they knew they would be. They were exploring, looking for the Northwest Passage. He left England, two ships, Erebus and Terror, with 129 men, and they disappeared. They had high tech. They had steam-driven propellers. That was really high tech for the day, driven by coal. They had canned food. This was their moonshot. This was Britain's moon landing. It was a big deal, and these guys just totally disappeared. And it is here where the first 3 of the 129 men died that first winter. There are 2 other graves there, people who died subsequently looking for the Franklin expedition. And I will point out that it took 170 years for people to find the 2 missing Franklin ships. And they found one about 3 weeks after I made this image. They found one about 400, or I don't know how many miles, 300 some miles. I'll show you on a chart south of here. They finally found the last. They were reduced to cannibalism. It was a horrific situation. This was a house sort of erected, a rescue station from subsequent rescue operations. Canned food was a really big deal back then, and they made a cross out of some of the empty cans. This is a major site in the high Canadian Arctic. European heads of state have visited here. So there's Beachy Island, where we just were. I'll quickly point out that Franklin's men, as they tried to keep going in subsequent winters, they got down here, and then things started going really badly. They ended up abandoning ships somewhere in here. They have since found evidence of the men going ashore, abandoning ships, camping ashore, eating each other. They finally found the ships down here. So what we're doing now, we're in Resolute, and jumping ahead, we're going to end up circumnavigating here, but let's get to Resolute. I really got to speed this up. I apologize. Wonderful. Really a very high north. This is a base of oil, gas exploration, military, scientific exploration. They have an airstrip here where, honest to goodness, they land 737s on a gravel strip. 737s on a gravel strip. We didn't see that happen. That would have been so cool. Met these guys while there. She's the wife of the senior Mountie constable. The kids were great. This is a fake ship. Their father built them from old parts. So I'm walking down the hill from their house, and I see there's this funny smell in the air. There's a dog barking at me, and there are these polar bear skulls out, and I'm looking at those. The guy hears the dog barking, comes out. We get talking, and we're having a nice chat, and I allow that he's trying to sell me a polar bear skull. I said, I can't, we're American, we can't take any marine mammal parts. They consider, polar bears are considered marine mammals. They spend so much time in the water. And I said, well, that one on the left that's a really big one. And he goes, oh yeah, we sell, and he told me what the price on it was. And he was still trying to sell them to me. He said, you want to see a big one? And then all of a sudden I realized why it smelled funny. He was cooking polar bear heads in his backyard. This is one of the ways that the Inuit, who are very conservative, they do not just go out around sport shooting bears. This is one of the ways they make a living. Bears are not meat, considered particularly edible, good meat, but they can make a lot of money selling hunting permits, guiding sport hunters, and selling bear parts, as unpalatable as this may sound. These people are masters of survival, and with climate change, they're doing what they can to survive. The bear population is healthy. The danger to the bears is not, repeat, not the Inuit. It's the loss of ice. It's climate change. We're killing them. Anyway, you don't see that every day. We simply, I can't even begin to talk about the travesty, the atrocities perpetrated on the Inuit by the Canadian government. Reparations have been made. They now have their own province there, Nunavut. But the Inuit have been just abysmally treated, as we have treated our own native people here in the United States. It's tragic. Moving along, like I say, we're way above the tree line, but there are Arctic willows. This is a pretty healthy one. This is a much older one, a towering Arctic willow. Here's the main trunk here in the middle. I would say that towered maybe 2 inches above the ground level there, maybe 2.5. Beautiful trees. An immature, a young bearded seal that had clearly never seen anything like rose hardy. So here we are. A few of us had gone off in the Zodiacs char fishing, fishing for the fabled and delicious Arctic trout. And we got a call on the radio from the boat saying, get back here. We got the updated ice charts, the real ice charts. We got to get out of here. The winds are changing and we're going to be trapped in here. You got to come now. So here is what a real ice map looks like. Here's Somerset Island. The white, for the most part, is land. This means very, very little sea ice. This means more, and so forth and so on, as you can see from the legend at the bottom. We were up here and we were going here. We had to get through this. So we set off at once. Patrick Toomey, he is the world expert on ice. I wish I could tell you more about him. There's a whole strait in Antarctica named after him in his honor. So he was in his glory now. Now there's ice. So Toomey was up top. Here we are on the fly bridge, encased fly bridge. And this is the only sea ice we saw the whole time in the Northwest Passage. Unbelievable. This is it. This is all we saw. That's what the Northwest, I mean, this is unthinkable. This is why ships like Rose Hardy, thin-skinned aluminum boats that were meant for the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, etc., can actually get up there and make a passage. Briefly, I forget the name of this little bay, cove really. These are the bones of many, many, many hundreds, if not 1,000 or more, beluga whales that were trapped in this cove by three British whalers in the, I forget what year it was, but they trapped them in there. Beluga whales are the only mammal that sheds their skin. They come into very shallow water, really shallow water, like, waist deep, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet of water, and they roll around and abrade their skin off, the outer layers, on these very sharp Arctic rocks. The whalers had a windfall, a spectacular windfall for them. They trapped them in there. The beluga whales had the most valuable whale oil in that time, when whale oil, there were fortunes made on this one hunt alone. It was an eerie place, a killing field. Friends of our guides up in Resolute said that we could visit their hunting camp there on the east side of Somerset, which we did. We stopped for a little char fishing. They can land planes on these beaches. This is a pretty typical, apparently, modern, actually a pretty fancy palatial hunting camp. So we've set forth once again. There's less ice, but we're still in some ice. This is at midnight. We're running south, and we are headed, as you can see, the green is pulled back, so we were able to get through that. We're headed for here. And that's our next stop. This is Fort Ross at the very, very southern end of Somerset Island. It was a Hudson's Bay trading post established in 1929. It was the last they established. It didn't last long. It failed. Quite a poignant place to be. This is not my son's college dorm room. This is bear had gotten into their old house. But look at how, rule Britannia, good Brits and Canadians, fancy bookshelves, wallpaper. I mean, they did it right. They did it properly, by God, for the Queen. I'm going to have to rush through this. We knew that this small container ship was coming. We knew from radio contact, and we knew that this former Russian spy ship, which they always called meteorological vessels, they have a fleet of these, a host of these, I think like 13 or 14, most of which are mothballed, but several are now rented by environmental exploration companies taking tourists around to see both the Arctic and the Antarctic. It was a shock to see other people in what we had come to think of as our part of the world. So here we are entering now Bellat Strait. This is known technically as an extreme geographic point on this planet, because it is here. And I should point out, there's big tides rip through here. There's ice can come floating through there, especially the deadly, lethal, ship-sinking old ice that you can't see. So we were all hands, everybody was scrambled on full high alert watch going through there. The big deal here, why it's extreme, is this gravel bar, this one right here, is actually the northernmost point of the New World. There is nothing further north than this gravel bar. North America ends in a gravel bar. And there we are, sort of abeam it, looking back. You could walk from there to the tip of South America. Nothing to the north but islands. So we're heading back now to Baffin Island. And our, as it turned out to be, final destination, Arctic Bay, hands down my favorite of the Inuit villages we visited, population about 900. Ted didn't mention, I co-founded the Island Institute in 1983. Another guy and I started that. And my life for 30 years has been many remote communities around the world, certainly the more remote offshore islands here in Maine. This felt so at home to me. It felt like home in so many ways. It's this beautiful, beautiful place, remote, austere, hard to make a living up there. But these are the masters of survival. So that's looking down on the village. The Inuit called this big harbor here, this bay, the pocket. And so here's the houses along the shore at the head of the harbor, head of the bay. The church, the school. And while at the school, I was looking down from here. So the four-wheelers are ubiquitous. There are a few trucks, but everybody's got four-wheelers. I'm looking down from up by the school, and here's this guy with a gill net strung off the beach. And I figured, well, he's obviously fishing, getting char. Again, the big, delicious, beautiful Arctic trout. But there are kids down there, and there's the grandfather cutting up fish and the puppy. So I wandered down, and sure enough, getting char, and no big deal about that. But here's the indicator. I got home, and in Elizabeth Colbert's piece, there was mention of, and I don't have a quote here, but it is alleged, or the Inuit of Northern Baffin Island allege that they are finding a few Atlantic salmon. And Elizabeth mentioned that because there have never, ever, ever, ever been Atlantic salmon in there before. So with archaeological digs and so forth, that's pretty much indisputable. They're getting salmon. This is, again, the expansion of a range of a species due to climate change. So allege this fish. This is a great story. I'm going to make it really quick. This guy was trying, Jaco, and I went four-wheeling together. He took me on a ride. He was trying to sell me a big narwhal tusk. And I explained, no, we're American. We're going to hit customs back in the States. I can't do that. But I will admit, I confess, I bought a small inner tusk from him for $20. Narwhals have small, they're 12, 15 inches inner tusks that typically do not come out through their foreheads. So he sold me that, we hit it off, and he accorded me the honor of taking me back to his house, and he gave me muktuk, which is the outer blubber layer from a narwhal. And I've been warned, if anybody ever offers you muktuk, it is a great insult to decline, but you will find it inedible, which did indeed play out. Why is this an indicator of climate change? We go back to Jaco's house, and to get the frozen muktuk, he went into his freezer. Yes, you can sell freezers and refrigerators. The permafrost there is going, gone. Houses are all tilting. Great guy, and no, muktuk is inedible. So this is basically like the parking lot of Shaw's or Hannaford. Everything there is extraordinarily expensive. Kids were just beautiful, wonderful. Oh, I love the kids. Never saw, nobody had an iPhone. There were no glowing screens. Interesting, you can see here, the satellite dishes all point almost parallel to the ground, due south. Instead of pointing up in the sky, the satellites are all way south of here. They have some connectivity. They are in touch with the world. The little boys grow up playing with boats. Boy, did they ever love seeing this thing, which would really rip along. Hunting canoes. This is we were the only yacht in Arctic Bay that entire summer, and this is the only cruise ship. This one is actually a little bit smaller than the old Russian boat. We knew they were coming. So we loaded. Arctic Bay is known for its artisans and crafts people, artists. So we were there before these guys. We got some really beautiful carvings and so forth and so on. People often ask me here when I come to this slide, well, what do the Inuit think about, how this is all changing and tourists are coming in and, oh my God, this is going to, change everything. Well, we've changed everything. Climate change has changed everything. The Inuit are masters, global masters of survival and adaptation. And so this is one way, just as we on the coast of Maine, a lot of us on Maine, on the islands and coast, rely on the summer traffic, constitutes a major part of income. These masters of survival there are perfectly well aware of that. And that's one of the many things they're doing to get by. This is little Oscar, who hounded me all day trying to sell me a second tusk, inner tusk. That's what they look like. This is Willie, wonderful guy, great guy. We helped fix an outboard of his, and he was trying to sell us. I kept saying, no, we can't buy these, but he posed for me with these two real narwhal outer tusks. 11,000 Canadian and 14,000 Canadian is what they were going for. So you remember the photograph of the wife of the Canadian, the constable back in Arctic, in Resolute. We left in a hurry. She said, we'll miss you. If you do get to Arctic Bay, if you play golf, or anybody in the boat likes to play golf, over the range of hills there in Victory Bay, there's a golf course. So the second captain aboard and the second engineer had been going on and on about, as soon as I mentioned this, they get all fired up and telling us what great golfers they are. And, oh my God, they'd love to play golf, up above the Arctic Circle. I'm not making this up. So I got in touch with the guy that she had pointed me to, and we were able to go golfing. This is over in Victory Bay. A pause here. Look again, look at the color of the landscape. I'm going to pause here briefly. The real money up there is not about tourism. It's not about selling carvings. It is no longer about hunting, fishing. There are trillions of dollars. This is the geopolitics of the Arctic. This is what the Camden Conference is about. It's about the North being open. You can go across the top of the world now. It's about shipping. It's about access. And it's about the trillions of dollars worth of oil, gas, and minerals there. There is a large, so again, it's mineral rich. This is where Arctic Bay stages for the winter hunt, the snowmobiles and the hunting sleds are waiting for the ice to come back in there. And it's around this point, about 10 miles this away, they are building a big aluminum plant there. They're mining bauxite there. So there's all this. And true to my word, we're coming close to the end here. Don't get the hook on me yet, guys. Indeed, there is a golf course. So, so the second captain and the second engineer in particular was telling us how great they were. So we all go golfing. I've never golfed in my life, but I was along for this, and it was one of those experiences I will never, ever forget. At night, playing golf with these 10 Inuit guys. Here's our second captain teeing off. Here's our second engineer over here, who proved not to be such a great golfer. They all were hilarious about that. They have their own unique rules there. There's a low tide game and a high tide game. This is the fairway. This is not the rough. This is the fairway. And you play either 4 or 5 holes down this way, and 4 or 5, and then you play back here in the final holes where you tee off the first time. So there are all sorts of funny rules, including I saw a guy's name was Dominic. This was in his golf bag. So Dominic, what kind of club is this? So here's Ian posing with this. Dominic was the guy who was assigned to carry the heavy rifle, because it's here where Arctic Bay cleans out all of its catch to speak of. Little fish and stuff they do in the village, but whales, big catch, seals and so forth and so on, caribou, they clean them over here to keep the bears away from town. So one of the rules, so this is for protection, should a bear really get crazy and come in on them, It also speaks to a house rule that if a seal, a whale, walrus, whatever, are spotted up in the bay there, they all drop their bags and quit getting the boats and go after whatever. House rule. So here's, a former whale over here. There were bear tracks all around it. Ian, second captain, is driving, or trying to get sink. Here's the hull, I guess is what I'm saying over there. And there's that. We're so close to the end here. Here's most of the crew that was there with us that night. Tommy and I are still friends on Facebook. He's the alpha hunter there. So I've got 2 images left. And I'm gonna just very quickly, I'm gonna truncate what I would usually say, but I'm just gonna race through some of this. As I've said already, 2016 was the hottest year on record, tied only by 2020. In 2016, remember 2016? In over 6 hours of combined presidential debate 4 years ago, there was not one single question asked about climate change, not one. I'm not even going to talk about the last 4 years and the administration's take on, lack of belief in science, belief in climate change. It's just unbelievable. And I, for one, I could not be happier that we are about to see people who believe in science and believe in climate change and are going to address it. Thank God at last. So this goes on and on, but in fairness to all, I've lost track of the time. Someday our grandchildren are going to be asking, what did you do about this mess when you saw it coming? What did you do? In my humble opinion, actually it's not humble at all, it's my fierce opinion, to remain uninformed or worse in denial is at best shameful. It's never been more appropriate to think globally and act locally and globally. And I'm going to leave you with part of a poem. After my first sharing of these images, when I got home and I showed them here at the Rockport Opera House, a friend the next day sent me a poem called Hieroglyphic Stairway, written by Drew Dellinger. And in my mind, it says it all. So this is just part of Drew's poem. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, what did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unraveling? Surely you did something when the seasons started failing, as the mammals, reptiles, birds were all dying. Did you fill the streets with protest when democracy was stolen? What did you do once you knew? And that's it. And thank you. I flew out the next day after the golf. The airport was back here. Little dirt strip. It was not a 737, and started the long trip home. This place lives in my heart. I can't wait to get back. I hope I can get back. Anyway, thank you all. That's it.
Thank you. It was very, very informative and delightful.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. I have more, as Ted said, there are more photographs of the Arctic. There's actually a little film clip on my, the ralstongallery.com site. And yeah, by the way, it's very nice to see so many people at once not wearing masks.
Good point. Well, Peter, I want to thank you. That was awe-inspiring. That was
Yes.
terrific. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome very much. Thank you all.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe,
You too.
Thank
be
you.
well, hope for the best for the next week.
Yes.
Yes.
We should all have everything we've got crossed on this next week. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Very much.
Thank you. Excellent job. Good night.
Thank
Thank you
you.
again.
Stay safe. Take care.
You too.
Thank you, Ted and Sophie.